It all began on a quiet Saturday morning in my suburban neighborhood, the kind where every lawn looked identical, every mailbox matched, and every neighbor smiled just enough to keep things civil. For years, I'd kept to myself, maintaining my small corner property with pride. That corner, however, happened to border the main walking trail, a boundary most respected. Most, except for Karen. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, had a new obsession lately, her ATV. Every morning, she'd roar through the neighborhood like she owned the place, cutting corners, kicking up dust, and sometimes tearing across lawns to save time. At first, I ignored it. After all, she claimed it was just a shortcut. But when her tires started leaving muddy ruts across the back of my property, I decided enough was enough. It started subtly. I placed small wooden stakes and a private property, no trespassing sign at the edge of my yard. I thought that would be enough of a message. The next morning, I found the sign tossed into the ditch and the stakes flattened beneath ATV tire marks. That was my first warning. Karen didn't take no for an answer. Later that week, I caught her in the act, speeding right through again, a smug grin plastered across her face. She slowed just long enough to make eye contact before revving up and vanishing behind the trees. That moment, I realized this wasn't an accident, it was a challenge. And in an HOA neighborhood, challenges always end in fireworks. I spent the next day building a proper wooden fence across the back path. Strong posts, thick boards, something no ATV could casually roll through. As I hammered the final nail, I felt a strange satisfaction. The shortcut was closed. My peace, finally restored. Or so I thought. The next morning, I woke to shouting. Karen was in my yard, red-faced and furious. She was demanding I remove the fence, claiming it blocked community access. Of course, there was no community access, just her personal shortcut. When I ignored her and went inside, she stormed off, muttering something about HOA violations and payback. That evening, I received an official HOA letter taped to my door. It accused me of unauthorized construction and demanded I remove the fence within 48 hours or face fines. I couldn't believe it. She'd actually weaponized the HOA against me for protecting my own land. But instead of backing down, I decided to fight back the right way. I gathered the property maps, my deed, and local zoning information proving that fence was 100% within my rights. The next HOA meeting would be my battlefield. As the weekend rolled around, the tension thickened. Karen avoided eye contact during her daily walks, but I could feel the storm brewing behind that fake smile. Neighbors whispered about the fence drama and Karen's ATV tantrum. I tried to stay calm, reminding myself that I was in the right. That calm vanished when I discovered deep gouges in my fence late Sunday night. Someone had rammed into it, hard. Splinters scattered across the grass, and muddy ATV tire marks led straight back toward Karen's yard. That was the moment I knew, she wasn't done. She was escalating. And I was ready for her. The morning after the attack on my fence, the evidence was clear. Muddy tire tracks cut straight through the grass, ending right where my fence had been hit. I took photos, every angle, every splinter, every drop of evidence that pointed directly to Karen. She must have thought she could scare me into submission, but all she did was prove how far she was willing to go. Later that day, I attended the HOA meeting, property documents in hand. As I walked in, every head turned. The atmosphere was thick with gossip, everyone knew something had gone down. And there she was, Karen sitting smugly at the front, papers spread before her like she was presiding over a courtroom. She was confident, too confident, and that's when I realized she was planning something. She began with a rehearsed speech about neighborhood harmony, claiming my fence disrupted the community's flow and was dangerously close to HOA property. It was a performance, calm, manipulative, and perfectly designed to paint herself as the victim. But when it was my turn to speak, I laid out the facts. Deed records, boundary maps, property lines, everything proved the fence was completely legal. The room grew silent. Even the HOA president seemed uncertain now. Karen's confident smirk faltered for the first time. Then, I pulled out my final piece of evidence, photos of the damaged fence, the tire marks, and a timestamp from my security camera showing Karen's ATV headlights cutting across my yard that night. Gasps filled the room. Karen went pale, her eyes darting between the photos and the faces of our neighbors. For a moment, she was speechless. Then she snapped. She accused me of spying, of fabricating evidence, even of harassment. Her voice rose until she was practically yelling at the entire room. The president finally cut her off, reminding her that the HOA didn't condone destruction of property, especially when caught on camera. The meeting ended in chaos. Karen stormed out, slamming the door so hard it echoed. I left quietly, but the victory was mine, at least for now. The HOA agreed to review the evidence and promised a decision soon. I knew Karen wouldn't let it go. She never did. That night, I noticed something strange. My outdoor security lights flickered off one by one. When I stepped outside, I realized someone had pulled the plugs. I followed the cords and found them cut clean. My gut told me it was her again. The next morning, I installed new cameras, hidden this time, and added motion sensors at the fence line. Days passed, and for a while, things were quiet. No tire marks, no shouting, no letters. Maybe she'd finally realized she'd lost. But peace never lasted long around Karen. One evening, just after sunset, I heard the familiar hum of an engine, low and angry. I peeked out the window and saw the ATV creeping through the edge of the woods behind my fence. She was back. I grabbed my phone and started recording as she revved forward, trying to push through a small gap where the fence had splintered before. But this time, she didn't make it. The front wheels caught on the posts, the ATV tipped sideways, and with a loud crunch, it rolled halfway over. Karen tumbled into the mud, completely drenched and screaming. My camera caught every second. I rushed out, not to help, but to make sure she wasn't seriously hurt. She was fine, just furious and embarrassed. When she saw me recording, she started yelling threats, promising to sue me for everything. I told her calmly that the video would go to both the HOA and the police, and I meant it. The next morning, I sent the footage to the HOA board and filed a report for property damage. Within hours, the neighborhood group chat exploded with rumors. Some neighbors even admitted they'd seen her taking that shortcut through other people's yards before. Her reputation was collapsing, and she knew it. By the end of the week, the HOA announced its decision: my fence was legal, Karen was in violation of property rules, and she'd be fined for damages. She tried to appeal, but the video evidence sealed her fate. The same board she once controlled now turned against her. But Karen wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. Because just when I thought the chaos was over, I woke up to something even worse. My fence was gone. Completely torn down, every board missing, every post uprooted. And spray painted across my lawn in bright red paint were the words, "You'll regret this." The morning sunlight revealed the full extent of the destruction. My fence, the one I'd spent days building and defending, was nothing but splintered wood scattered across the grass. The red spray paint across my lawn screamed, "You'll regret this," a message so bold it almost felt like she wanted me to find it. My stomach twisted with anger and disbelief. This wasn't just petty HOA drama anymore, this was criminal. I called the police immediately. When they arrived, I showed them everything: the missing fence, the paint, the previous damage reports, and most importantly, the security footage from my newly installed hidden cameras. It didn't take long before the truth surfaced. The footage showed Karen, under the cover of night, cutting through the backyard with a flashlight and crowbar in hand. She worked furiously, pulling apart boards, hauling them off to a nearby wooded area, and finally spray painting the words before driving off on her ATV. The officers were stunned. They took statements, collected evidence, and assured me this was more than enough for vandalism and trespassing charges. I felt both relieved and sick, relieved because I had proof, but sick because a neighbor, someone I saw almost daily, had gone this far over a piece of wood and some property lines. The news spread like wildfire through the community. Within hours, the neighborhood chat blew up again. Some couldn't believe Karen would do such a thing, others admitted they'd seen her acting erratically for weeks. She'd apparently bragged to one of her friends about teaching me a lesson. That lesson, however, was about to backfire harder than she could imagine. Later that evening, a police cruiser parked in front of her house. Neighbors peeked through curtains, pretending not to watch as officers spoke to Karen on her porch. Her hands flailed, her face turned red, and soon after, they escorted her to the car. She wasn't arrested on the spot, but she was cited and charged for property destruction and trespassing. The HOA president, informed of everything, issued an emergency notice suspending her from any board activities until the matter was resolved. The queen of the HOA had officially fallen. In the days that followed, I rebuilt the fence, stronger, taller, and reinforced with steel posts this time. But I didn't do it alone. Several neighbors, tired of Karen's antics, volunteered to help. For the first time, we actually came together, laughing, sharing stories, and rebuilding what she tried to destroy. It felt poetic, her chaos had somehow united the very community she once controlled. A week later, I received a formal letter from the HOA apologizing for their previous mishandling of the situation. They even reimbursed part of my expenses, citing misrepresentation by a board member. Karen's fine was hefty, her reputation ruined, and her position stripped. She tried appealing once more, but the HOA had had enough. And just when I thought that was the end of it, karma delivered one final twist. A month later, her house went up for sale. The same woman who terrorized the neighborhood with her rules and control couldn't bear to stay any longer. Rumor had it, she was moving to start fresh somewhere else. No one shed a tear, if anything, the neighborhood threw a small barbecue to celebrate the peace returning. Standing at my fence, looking over the yard that had caused so much chaos, I couldn't help but smile. The shortcut was gone, my property was secure, and the sound of that roaring ATV was nothing but a memory. In the end, all Karen's fury, manipulation, and sabotage led her to her own downfall. The HOA, once her playground, became her undoing. And me? I didn't need revenge. She'd already given it to herself. Moral of the story. Sometimes standing your ground isn't about fighting fire with fire, it's about letting the truth, and karma, do the heavy lifting. Karen thought she could bully her way through my yard. But all she did was crash straight into reality. Collision.